You're listening to Why We Do What We Do. Welcome to Why We Do What We Do Mini. I'm your host, Abraham.
And I'm your host, Shane.
Today we are talking in a brief, short-form format in one of our mini episodes where we just tackle something really quick and then we get out of there.
That's the way to do it.
And today we're talking about books bound in human skin. So, trigger warning, we are going to talk about death and murder and using body parts to make books. If that's a problem for you, may want to sit this one out.
Somebody who would appreciate the show would be somebody like Ed Gein.
Yes. He would
At least
like,
this episode.
Tell me more about these books made in human skin.
He's like, I didn't get to the books part.
Yeah.
The lamps, I got that. But the books part, I didn't get there yet.
Now, why would someone want to bind a book in human skin? And what are books bound in human skin? These questions and more answered in this episode today.
Yes, I would like to say it's kind of like how clinical lycanthropy was, where there are enough conversations around this for us to warrant a show. Like, we have to talk about this, and there have been enough instances of this thing to warrant it as a human phenomenon.
True. All right, let's get into this background here. You want to start?
Yeah, so the act of binding books in human skin is called anthropodermic bibliopagy.
Yep.
Anthropodermic means, or comes from anthropos, which means man or human, and bibliopagy is biblion, which means book, and pagia, which is to fasten. So to fasten books with human is essentially what that means.
And we missed the part of the word that was dermic, which often refers to the dermis or the epidermis, which is skin. So
yes,
so that's probably the other part there.
Yeah.
So yes, this is the thing that happens. The earliest known anthropodermic book was a French Bible, of course, from the 13th century. Although the most proven examples are from the late 16th through the 18th centuries. Not a lot of mass production of these.
There were a couple of reasons why this was practiced. One was punishment for criminals. I mean, to be fair, as somebody who really enjoys books, that wouldn't be much of a punishment for me.
Yeah. You're like, I got to die doing what I loved, becoming a book.
Becoming a book. Yeah. Just wrap me around some paper.
Another reason might be something cool to show your friends, I guess, if that's something your friends find cool. And you?
Sure. Another one would be to memorialize the dead, like I said. So, turn my bones into a coral reef and put my skin on a book.
Yep. And then to say thank you to patients who helped doctors to learn. So thank you, patients. So the doctors are saying thank you to the patients.
The doctors are saying thank you to the patients by bounding their books in their skin. I would be so bummed out if I were a doctor and somebody was like, thank you for saving my life. Here's a book that's made of my skin. So bummed out.
Yeah. It's possible they were like, hey, you did some really fun experiments on me that killed me. And so as a thank you for that, you can use my corpse when I'm gone to make a book out of your endeavors. I don't know.
What if a doctor was doing that and then somebody said, yeah, you can use my skin for a book, and then they've put out Twilight?
How disrespectful.
Right.
All right. So that's what they are. They're books that are literally, so books have covers. In this case, the covers are wrapped in human skin. I think they still have like traditional, like the cardboard underneath, but then you put the skin on top because obviously skin's not going to hold its position super well if it's there by itself.
Right.
So I think you stretch it across sort of like a book cover. In middle school, you used to make those book covers out of like paper bags and then you could draw all over them and all of that. So similar idea, but I guess with human skin. And we talked about the reasons why. Here's some famous examples of books bound in human skin.
Right. So William Burke and William Hare were infamous Irish-Scottish serial killers accused of killing approximately 16 people. Burke and Hare were body snatchers who sold the corpses of their victims to medical schools for dissection. When they found it increasingly difficult to obtain fresh corpses, though, they turned to murder, targeting vulnerable people such as the sick, elderly, and destitute. So people who were kind of on their way out or people who would not be missed. And then you see that kind of like as a common MO for serial killers.
And so they would suffocate their victims and then sell their bodies to Dr. Robert Knox. There's actually a whole thing that's probably worth doing either another mini or a full episode on the grave robbers, because there's a lot about this at the time where they were going through. And there's also some lore, which seems to be incorrect, about laws regulating how deep graves had to be to try and dissuade grave diggers. But as I said, topic for another day. Anyway, the more expeditious thing is to not dig up the bodies, but to create your bodies. And so they'd suffocate them.
Sure.
They sold them to Dr. Robert Knox as a prominent anatomy lecturer in Edinburgh. Burke and Hare were arrested, and Hare turned against Burke, testifying against him in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Burke, of course, then was found guilty of murder and was hanged in front of a large crowd in January 1829.
Which is apparently like a big public thing in general, like public hangings. Like people really dug that.
Yes.
Because I guess they couldn't watch The Good Place, or they didn't have Netflix. Now, his body was subsequently dissected and his skeleton preserved, where it remains on display at the Anatomical Museum of the University of Edinburgh. In a twist of fate, Burke's skin was used to bound a book dubbed Burke's Skin Pocketbook that now resides at Surgeons' Hall Museum in Edinburgh, Scotland. The book is a small, pocket-sized edition of The History of a Woman Patient.
Yeah, so that's one famous example of a book bound in human skin. We do have more examples for you, but first, the canker sore of the entertainment world, advertisements. So we've been talking about the famous books bound in human skin. This next one is Narrative of the Life of James Allen, alias George Walton, alias Jonas Pierce, alias James H. York, alias Burley Grove, the Highwayman, being his deathbed confession to the warden of the Massachusetts State Prison. That title is a mouthful.
That is... I've read books that have very long titles where it's like, you know, you've got the brief and frightening reign of Phil, but that's where it stops. It's not additional... things. So
yeah,
this is great.
This book is a first-hand account of James Allen, alias George Walton, and all the others, who was a highway thief in the early 1800s, who reveals his crimes in a deathbed-style confession. Very exciting.
That's a fun way to go out, I guess.
Sure.
In this book, he shows remorse for his crimes and asks for his skin to be saved and tanned so 2 copies of books could be bound in his skin and given to John Fenno, a man who he tried to rob and fought back. It is told that he was impressed by his bravery to fight back. And so there's actually an excerpt from this that we probably got to share.
Yes. Taken from the Boston Athenaeum Library catalog, where the book currently resides, and it goes as such, quote, "Before his death, Allen asked that enough of his skin be tanned to provide bindings for 2 copies of these memoirs, one for John Fenno, Jr., and the other for his attending physician, Dr. Harry I. Bowditch. A sufficient piece of skin was removed from Allen's back and taken to a local tannery, where it was treated to look like gray deerskin and finally delivered into the hands of Peter Lowe." End quote.
Peter Lowe sounds like somebody who would know how to work with human skin to bind books.
Does.
Is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
But also, this is the second doctor that's getting a book bound in human skin. So I have no wonder people don't trust doctors.
Yeah. As a doctor, not a medical doctor, but as a doctor, I would like to say, please don't give me books bound in human skin.
I would also like to second that. As a doctor, not a medical doctor, but as a doctor, please do not send me any books. Honestly, try not to send me any books bound in any skin. I'd be fine with no skin-bound books.
I'll take the skin of a tree as acceptable skin for a book, I guess.
Yeah, that works just fine.
Yeah.
Now, one of the few surviving examples in the UK is owned by the Bristol Record Office and made from the skin of the first man to be hanged at Bristol Gaol on Friday the 13th, 1821. Scary day. Now, its embossed dark brown cover was made with the skin of 18-year-old John Horwood, who was hanged for the murder of Eliza Balsam. He was 17 at the time of the murder, and the book chronicles his crime that took place. That's a wild turn for I got to comment on this. It's like you've got a memoir of somebody on their deathbed with a book that is made of their own skin. You've got somebody who is like, it's a true crime book that is bound in the skin of the person that committed the crime. I feel like it makes sense thematically, but it's also just a wild thought.
Also, just as a fun aside, I'm looking at Friday the 13th, 1821. If it had been 1822, those numbers would have added up to 13, and we would have had a real numerology coincidence. Missed opportunity there. 1 year later.
I know. He should have waited.
Yeah. Or 1 century later, but 1 year later would have been fine.
Yeah.
There is a book at Harvard University called Des Destinées de l'Âme, which is Destinies of the Soul, apparently, that was covered with the skin of an unclaimed female mental patient who died of quote-unquote natural causes, if you will. And the book was first published in 1879 by French poet and essayist Arsène Houssaye. And so that's a thing that apparently happened.
Okay. As somebody who has published books, I don't know that I would ever feel comfortable requesting, like, hey, listen, you got any skin laying around for this?
Yeah, particularly of like a body of someone who was institutionalized.
Yeah, probably not treated very well while they're there. And probably, arguably, there for the wrong reasons. If we're talking 1879 and they are a female mental patient, they probably just like had a menstrual cycle and got put there for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, like a bad day.
Yeah, they had a bad day. They spoke out of turn because they said, I don't like this meal.
Yeah.
And then they were gone. Now, Father Henry Garnet heard the confessions of many that were involved in the gunpowder plot, a plan to blow up the Parliament in 1605. Now, although he was not directly involved in the crimes, he was hung, drawn, quartered, and his skin removed for the binding the book, A True and Perfect Relation. The book has the impression of Garnet's face on the front cover, and there's some controversy about this one. I don't know why, though.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure either, but it does sound like I'm thinking about the person who has to do the skinning of the body and how horrific that would feel to me. So,
yeah.
And then the process of turning that skin into, I don't know, the whole thing, there's a lot of steps in here that are just a little make me queasy, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think of like in that situation, I don't even think about like how that got to that point. What I think about is that person that goes, you know what I know how to do really well is I know how to do leather work. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mold this cover to have this man's face on it. Like that to me is like a whole nother level of like craftsmanship and weirdness.
Yeah, that is. Okay. The Wellcome Library in London has a book which was bound and signed by Dr. Ludovic Bowland. As a medical student, he decided to bind a book using the skin of a female patient, again, whose body went unclaimed, again. And in addition to this, it had a gilt paneled spine, gilt borders, and cover ornamentation and fillets, or fillets, depending on whether you want to read that with an accent or not.
Yeah.
So more doctors with leather-bound books.
Yeah, again, doctors. So, I don't know. I guess maybe while you kind of process that information, it's probably worth listening to ads that are definitely not human skin books.
Now, some of you might be wondering, how is it allowed, and like, why do we do this? Why do people, how are they allowed to do this? Like, aren't there laws? Aren't there ethical, like, codes about this?
Yeah.
Aren't those technically human remains, and shouldn't there be done about that? That is very astute of you for catching that point, and if you didn't, that is okay, because I probably would not have thought about that beyond all of the queasiness I've been feeling the whole time.
Right.
So I do understand if you did not have that question, but it's a good one.
There isn't actually any sort of consensus on how to handle these books, but one person, Paul Needham, has suggested that they remove the skin and give the human remains a proper burial, which I think is reasonable and considerable.
Yeah.
Paul worked at the Scheid Library for over 20 years, and the Scheid Library was once a private library and is now a permanent part of the Department of Rare Books and Special Collections of the Princeton University Library. So this is somebody who, like, it sounds like they probably deeply care about books in general and also has some respect for something like this. And even to that degree, he's like, we should probably get rid of these things. Like, what's the point of preserving them?
Right. Yeah. You know, the fact that we don't do this very much anymore should also speak to the fact that maybe we don't think that this is a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of bad. Kind of bad.
Yeah. Some other fun things about this. So the Anthropodermic Book Project was formed to create a census, so sort of a enumeration of the books and to verify their authenticity. And so one of the questions I had going into this is how many there are. And the current count record that was updated most recently in May in 2019 is there are allegedly 50 anthropodermic books that have been identified and presumably verified.
Which is a shockingly small amount given how horrible humans have been throughout history and like how many have survived all this time. I mean, like, yeah, we have humans have a history of like just burning books whenever they are mad about something, like,
True.
Dr. Seuss or whatever. But I do think it's interesting that there are only 50 in existence right now.
Yeah. And to think about, I think there's just probably many that are not known. Like, there's no way that Ron DeSantis by himself doesn't have 50 books bound in human skin.
Oh, 100%. Oh, for sure.
Yeah, that he cultivated himself, probably.
Oh, easily. Now, when you start looking at this number 50, these are identified books that are either in different phases. They're being tested, they're confirmed, or they were proven not to be human. So the books tested or in process were 31. The books confirmed as human were 18. So out of all those 50, there were only 18 that were confirmed human.
Yeah.
And there were 13 books that were proven not to be human, but originally were thought to be when they went into this organization.
Yeah, so if you're keeping tally, 49 of them are thought to be and are, most of those are currently in the process of being tested. And that's how I think we got to that 50-ish number.
Right.
Yeah, to test this, they use something called peptide mass fingerprinting to verify that it is, in fact, human skin. And if you look at the website, you will see that peptide mass fingerprinting can identify mammalian sources of collagen-based materials, such as book bindings, leather, and parchment, to determine whether that thing then contains the cells that would be found in human skin, and that's how they determine if that's what it is.
Yep. Wild stuff.
Yeah. So that's it. Books bound in human skin. I don't think I have anything else on this topic. Do you have anything else?
I don't want anything else on this topic. It's gross.
Yeah, I think that's about as much as we want to have happen, maybe even a little bit more. So hopefully we're not trying to eat lunch during this and we didn't ruin your day.
Yeah.
And just gave you something to think about a little bit and maybe then forget. To me, the key take-home point from this, if anything, is that the term anthropodermic means covered in human skin.
Yeah, which is like kind of fascinating in itself.
Yeah. All right. But cool. Anything else from you?
No, I think that covers it.
All right. Perfect. This is Abraham.
And this is Shane.
Mini out.
See ya.
You've been listening to Why We Do What We Do. You can learn more about this and other episodes by going to www.wwdpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you have an awesome day.